Alrighty, well, I think we might be live. Let me double check. Okay, we're live.
Yep.
All right, well, welcome back to Salty Saints. My name is Hayden Holm. This is my brother Tanner with us, and we also are joined by @SwordOfLaban, David Hutchinson. Always happy to have him with us today. We're going to be talking about Reddit questions. We've got a handful. Some of them are heavy, some of them are light and fun. We're going to keep it open. We're going to keep it awesome. Hopefully have a good time. The idea, hopefully, is that if there is someone out there who feels like they're in a forgotten or lost Elders Quorum, that hopefully something like this might help you feel connected to some of your brothers in the church. So feel free to ask questions. Feel free to make comments. We'll try and get to everybody's chat as they come in. And we're going to also get to some of the chats that we have in our Discord. So without further ado, we will start with the first question. Okay. Let me pull up my screen. Okay. Here we go. All right, can you see this? Perfect. Let me check mics, make sure we're good. Last time we had a little bit of issue with the audio on that. So I'm just gonna, we should be good on that. Okay. This is from Recovering Sationalist on the R Latter-day Saints thread. It says, I think I'm losing my faith. It says, current member here. Just to preface, I'm probably going to make this post on a few different subreddits, blah, blah, blah. He wants to get a handful of different opinions, is the main gist of it. Well, here it goes. So I'm starting to have a serious trial of faith. I'm struggling to believe that God exists. I tend to think in symbolisms, so I had the thought that I could go to the mountains to pray, the way that the prophets of old did. I imagine myself looking up into the sky with a smile, but then my unbelief caught up with me, and all I could imagine was looking up and seeing airplanes above me. I guess it's just where my headspace is right now. I'm worried that the church isn't true, and that my whole life I've been led astray. I'm also worried that it is true and what that would mean for the path I'm currently on. I want to feel sure about making a decision either to stay or leave. I'm tired of feeling like I'm following the tune of a song I can't sing. Right now, I just feel so unsure. So many people within the church say that they know it's true. How do they know? Why can't I feel this way? If God exists, why wouldn't he want me to know? I thought the focus of my faith was self-improvement, but this contention I'm feeling within my heart seems hardly conducive to that goal. If it is real, I can't help but feel that I'm being strung along, which doesn't seem like the behavior of the God I know. I want to know the truth. A lot of people claim to have it, and at this point, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be thinking. I've been searching for anything I can latch onto, but just can't seem to latch onto anything. In the same way that I can rationalize away my religious experiences, I feel like I could just as easily rationalize away those rationalizations. I don't want to feel like I'm just deciding arbitrarily what to believe of my own volition. I also want to feel like I also don't want to feel that I'm falling prey to someone else's motivations on either side of the aisle. I understand that from the religious perspective, I'm supposed to have faith, but I can't reconcile that with the idea that I'm being misled. Surely, I'm not meant to have blind faith. Everyone's testimony has to have a test. Has to have at least something substantial, right? I've heard plenty of others who are able to conclude through various means that the church is true, but I haven't been able to make that conclusion. I feel like I could write a book about my feelings. It goes on a little bit more. This is getting a little lengthy, so I will skip ahead a little bit. He says, it's not like I'm considering leaving because I want to start being a sinner. I thought that was pretty good. I really don't think my morals would change much if I left. I'm thinking about this purely from the standpoint of what's real or not. And then it says, just feel free to ask questions and I'll try to answer what arises. So, what are your first thoughts when you hear a story like that? We'll start with Tanner and then we'll kick it out to David. What do you think, Tanner?
I think he's probably right in a lot of the things he's feeling. I also think that I've been there before. He's just way too far into his own head. That like, and that's a tough place to be. When I start diving into like, is anything real? Like this nice little existential crisis. I think the first thing you should do is just like take a deep breath and step back and just focus on one gospel principle at a time and study it out in your heart if you have a testimony of that thing, right?
Mm,
Do I
right.
know that God loves me? Yes or no? And just start there, Should I love my neighbors? Should I love my enemies? And just go one by one till you find something to base your belief on. And then you have a nice little clump of things that you might not have a testimony on that you can actually study out. So that's what I would just like narrow it down as much as humanly possible to like one idea at a time and start testing those out in your head. Because if you try with a larger scope to like tackle the entire church history, the entire world's perspective of the church, your own inward doubts all mixed into one, like you're just going to end up confused one way, like either way. You're just going to be completely confused the entire time. You got to scope things down and then just start little by little, because you're on top of a house. You're like on top of a Jenga tower right now, trying to like pull apart the whole thing as you're sitting on top of it. So
And
just
that's a
scale it back.
dangerous game to play. Yeah.
Very dangerous game. Yeah, you got to scale it back and just take a deep breath and then piece it out one piece at a time.
I like that approach. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it feels like you're trying to grapple onto this giant slippery thing. It's just got a lot of it's hard to sort of make ends of it. But I think the poster here is really doing the right thing fundamentally. They're examining what they know, and that's always a good thing. In the church, we're taught to examine what we know and to really understand it, and not to just believe anything on blind faith. I love that about our church, about the teachings of our prophets.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, I've got a question for you guys. How much should you tolerate ambiguity? Because before I say that, I've noticed that some people are more prone to needing an answer right now. They're needing to resolve evolution versus creation or something, like needing based upon what they know right now. I have to have an answer. It's this or it's that. I'm going to just go with that. Whereas other people live their whole life tolerating ambiguity, holding two ideas in their head simultaneously, and aren't as bothered by it. So, like, what is the right approach here, and how much should we tolerate ambiguity? It's kind of tangential to this whole question, but I think it's relevant. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One of the things that came to my mind as I was reading this and listening to your comment as well is the idea that this dispensation was opened because of ambiguity and because of a question. Like, God loves questions. I think you're absolutely right when you say, like, this guy's on the right track. Like, figuring out what's real is what a lot of times leads to an actual testimony. I think it was David Bednar, Elder Bednar, excuse me, that mentioned, like, if all you know about the church is something that someone else has told you, or if your testimony basically has been spoon-fed to you your entire life, then you're built on a foundation of sand. And so I feel like that analogy of being built on that foundation of sand is great, because it represents that kind of squishy ambiguity that this guy is going through right now. He's like, I don't know, this doesn't feel good. It's like, that's a sandy foundation. And it's really cool that he's figuring this out right now, because it means that you can actually start testing, experimenting on the word, which we're encouraged to do. Now, the thing to keep in mind, so there are a couple points that I wanted to make, but I think one thing to keep in mind, absolutely, is that if you're going to run an experiment on the word, you have to make sure that your actions are in line with that experiment. So, for example, if you're saying, like, I want to make sure that I want to see if this is real or not, I want to gain a testimony, then make sure that you're living in a way that the Spirit can be with you, so that you can experience that baptism of fire and that change of heart, so that you can experience and feel the Spirit with you. If you're saying this and then you're living as a performative contradiction, and you're going out and you're saying, all right, well, I'm going to fill my life with negative media. I'm going to go watch a bunch of, like, bad content and stuff like that. And I'm going to go listen to whatever music I want. And, I'm not going to work on myself or anything like that. Then, you're going to have a much, much harder time with that experiment. So if you're trying to get closer to God, you got to make sure that you are acting in a way where he can reach you and where he can touch you. But if you are distancing yourself and then complaining about that, saying, I don't hear him and I can't feel him, you have to observe your actions and see if that may be a part of it. David, you want to say something?
Yeah, I love that idea of like experiments. And of course, this is fundamental to our church, is experimenting upon the word. But I don't think of it as one big experiment. Maybe it can be thought of that way. I think of it as a bunch of little experiments. There are good and there are bad experiments, or worse experiments. So it's like things you can do that are better experiments and things that you can do that aren't very good experiments. Like there's hard experiments and easy experiments. So for instance, it's quite hard to do the experiment to actually study, pray, believe, think, ponder, do, go to the temple if you have a recommend and so forth. And it's quite hard to do that experiment. Whereas it's actually relatively easy to do the experiment of I'm just going to go sleep around and take drugs or whatever. I'm not saying this poster is going to do that, but I do think there are different experiments you can do. And other experiments might include what bothers you the most. Like, is it church history? Some experiment is to actually learn and understand that from the best sources. Is it the commandments or the things that we have to do? Well, those commandments, like if tithing is a big problem for you and you think the church has too much money, the hard experiment is to pay the tithing. The easy experiment is just to talk to your friends and say, what do you think? Does the church have too much money? And and I don't know. So does that make sense?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And I think of this as like a collection of like hundreds of experiments. Some are big, some are small, some are easy, some are hard, some are good, some are bad. And it's really selecting your experiments and doing the right kinds of experiments, I think.
It reminds me of that conference talk a while back about collecting rays of light. They said you get little rays of light throughout your life, and it's important that you collect those because eventually you'll see that it becomes this big pillar of light that can just illuminate your life and helps you see clearly all around you. Whereas if you let those opportunities pass, then you are eventually going to get at a dimmer and dimmer place that's harder and harder to see. So I love that call out. Great call out. The other piece that I think stood out to me about this post is he said, I want to figure out what's real. What's real? And to me, that there are some things that are real that I don't know that he might be considering. So I'm going to take a different approach to this that he may not be considering right now. So first of all, let me share my screen real quick. So this is from the National Library of Medicine, and basically it says the church attendance on and how it impacts depression and mental health, specifically within the LDS Church. One of the findings in here, which was fantastic to see, is that individuals attending church weekly or more often had a significantly lower risk for major depression. It was half that of the average non-churchgoer or non-religious person as well. So that's something that's real. That's something that you can hold on to and say, well, I mean, even just detaching this completely from the spiritual side of it, it's like there is going to be some positive physical and mental, emotional benefit from practicing a religion, connecting with community, and serving. There's another one that I found as well. I don't have the article.
Comment on that for a minute?
Yeah, go for it.
Like, I think that is perfectly valid and excellent. And I think it's maybe like climbing a rock wall. Sometimes you don't have, at certain points in your life, maybe this is all you've got to go on. Maybe just the fact that the church has good fruits and that, it has lower depression and has higher, like the marriage and so forth. Maybe that's actually all you have to go on because you're going through a hard spot and you don't have that more fundamental faith in God and the love of Jesus Christ and so forth. Hang on to that. Just for a while, you need to be able to tolerate that ambiguity at certain times in your life, I think, because I don't know about you guys, but I've certainly gone through phases in my life, and there are different pressures and things around you, and sometimes you just need to hold on to what you know and wait just a little while for the things you hope for.
100%. And I love down here. At the Mayo Clinic released another study. It says, most studies have shown that religious involvement and spirituality are associated with better health outcomes, including greater longevity, coping skills, and health-related quality of life, even during terminal illness, less anxiety, depression, and I don't know if we're allowed to say the word, but unaliving is what we have been saying. Several studies have shown that addressing the spiritual needs of the patient may enhance recovery from illness. So this was a clinical study that they did. So those are real things. Like I think if I'm understanding like the quote unquote real things that you're talking about, those are some real, I would say, telestial benefits from the church. And I would say keep those in mind as you make this decision. And I love that you're saying, if that's all you've got, hang on to that. That's real. Like
for now, yeah.
Yeah, for now. Yeah. I wouldn't say just like only hang on to that being the entire reason you go, because you're missing so much spiritual treasure that could be yours, but if that's all you got, hang on to it is what I would say. Tanner, anything from you? You've been a little quiet over there.
Yeah, well, I would just note that when he mentioned what he was confused, a lot of people say that they know that the church is true. And I have a problem with that phrase to begin with, because, I don't think it portrays what people are actually trying to communicate, which is that they have faith and they believe, and that faith has been confirmed to them in their life, and that's why they believe. But that's just a big mouthful to say. So people just end up saying, I know it's true, right? So that's what.
Right.
But, and he's confused because he sees people acting with certainty where he doesn't feel certain, right? So I think he should just take an Aristotelian approach and just start asking a bunch of questions about what he's feeling. This is what I would have him do if he was here. I would just wake up Sunday morning, and if you don't feel like going to church, ask yourself why. Like, why don't I want to go to church? And then answer that question. Like, I don't want to sit by people. I think it's boring. Just drill down. Like, why do I think it's boring? Well, maybe I'm not listening, or maybe it really is boring that week. Sometimes it's a boring week.
I get that. Yeah.
Or like, I don't want to interact with people. Well, maybe I should be interacting with people because it's healthy to do so. Like, am I engaging in the community of the ward or not? Yeah. And just like really drill down and ask yourself every single question on every single decision to find out where you actually stand on these things. Because comparing yourself to people who are deep in the thick of it, who might not know, but say that they do because they believe, right? Comparison is a thief of joy, right? Like, you're going to be stealing your joy, comparing yourself to people who are believing and actively striving for a greater belief in a church where you might not feel as certain. But I guarantee you, everyone has felt the exact same way this guy's feeling now if they have a true testimony of the church, right? That point, that crisis has to happen at some point where you say, I need to reflect and actually ask myself, why am I doing all these things? And some people go their whole lives, and it's at the very end of their life where that happens. Some people even will be having that point in the afterlife, Like, I feel like some people will just continue, like David, like you're saying, having those ambiguous thoughts and being able to kind of hold two conflicting thoughts in their head at the same time and just go through it, which is amazing that some people can do that, but they can't. Most of us are going to have a reflection point where we have to think about what we're doing and actively own that decision. Now, I think that's what's happening with this guy.
I am going to say, I think that ability to just sit in the ambiguity and just hang on, I think that is going to shrink and shrink and shrink the more that social media becomes predominant, the more that we see technology evolve. I think, especially with like the way that algorithms are shaping up, you're going to have seeds of doubt thrown at you no matter where you go. And so you're going to have to make a conscientious decision. Like, am I going to nurture the seed of doubt or the seed of faith? And I just don't know that that's going to be a viable option. I think it was before the age of the internet, before the age of social media, where you didn't have so many detracting voices, like the fox or Stromboli or the coachman from Pinocchio, that were like, hey, come join us. We got it better over here. Look at this. Look at all the fun we're having. Look at all these great things, and you can have it too. And this is my life. But they hide when the boys turn into donkeys, and they keep that under wraps, and they all do it for money. And anyway, did I just give away that I'm prepping a Pinocchio video? Yes. But I do think there are so many great lessons in there. That
I loved your previous video about a movie, so I'm sure I'm thrilled for this one. And
awesome.
Hannah, going back to what you said earlier, I think this is a real key. And you said it, and then we moved on. But just to add a little bit to that, you mentioned sort of this unreal expectations of other people's faith or of your own faith.
Yeah.
Like, what should the expectation for your own faith be? What should the expectation for other people's faith be? Because it sounds like, from this poster's perspective, they see all these other people with this incredible faith, and he feels himself here, and he feels like his expectation should be up here, but it's down here. And there's that mismatch that's the problem, actually.
Yeah.
So maybe some more realistic expectations. And I think one realistic expectation is faith will never be perfectly satisfying. And I think we want that satisfaction, right? I'm going to give an example here. I studied science in college and grad school, and I do science now.
Yeah.
And I went into science because in high school, it was super satisfying. And you could go and you could write the answer to a quiz or the test, and you could get it right, and you could check your numbers, or you could mix this with that, whatever. And I'm now in the real world of science, and I am never satisfied. You never get to the bottom of anything, both due to the depth and the nature of science, but also due to the to the nature of working in the corporate world. Is like we have to work on this, and then we can't actually finish that and polish it off. We have to actually move on to something else. And I'm like, I want to work on that, but now we have to leave that behind us. And this is not satisfying at all. It's the least satisfying thing I can imagine, right? And so I had to get over this idea of I love science because it satisfies me, and that's what I like about it, because I can tie things up with a bow. And I actually can't tie anything up with a bow anymore. So I've learned actually to find other parts of science that I like. It's not the dopamine rush of solving a problem on a test.
Yeah.
Other things about science that I like. So, and that also ties back into the expectations. Like I expected science to be satisfying when I came into it. Now I don't expect it to be satisfying, and I'm much happier. And nothing changed about the science. Is my expectations, right? That makes any sense.
That makes complete sense. It reminds me of like that President Hinckley story when he was on his mission and he was feeling terrible and he wasn't having success and he was really worried and he was like, I'm wasting my father's money, because his father scrimped and saved and gave everything he had and sacrificed a lot to get him out on a mission. And he felt like he was just doing a complete disservice to that sacrifice. And so he wrote his dad and he was like, I'm going to go home. I'm sorry that I'm wasting your money out here. And his dad just wrote that one line that said, forget yourself and put yourself to work, and that stuck with him. And he was just like, okay, it's, I need to get out of my head. I need to just focus on duty. And I think there is something to say about duty and its role to kind of help you to be able to not necessarily live in ambiguity as much as just be okay, just focusing on the task ahead of you and saying, I don't necessarily need to have all the answers right now, but there are tasks that need to be done. I have miles to go before I sleep and miles to go before I sleep, in the words of Robert Frost, and so I do think there's a call to duty within that comment you made, and I love that. Okay, anything else that we want to touch down on before we hit the next question?
Can I just say one more thought that I had? I know you want to move on, so
yeah, sure, yeah.
But I've noticed a common trend among anti-Mormons and to some degree among questioning Mormons such as this or LDS, is that to actually solve this problem, you need more information. And if you simply had more information, you would solve the problem. Furthermore, anti-Mormons believe if you simply knew everything, if you considered all details, you would leave the church. I have friends that explicitly have told this to me. If you take Joe Blow sitting in the sacrament pews and you sit him in a room and you tell him X, Y, and Z of things that happened in the church history, if he truly considers all of the evidence, he will leave the church. That is simply not true, right?
Yeah.
Because, for example, not to toot my own horn, but I think I know pretty much every anti-Mormon argument out there. I've heard it multiple times, and I keep hearing it repeated. And there's the occasional time when I hear something actually new and fresh. I'm like, that's interesting. And then I look into it, and it's a nothing burger. Maybe it takes me a while to look into it or whatever, but my mind is not blown. I'm not seeing novel things from these people. I'm not learning new things and expanding my knowledge and thinking wow all the time. But from the gospel, I am. My mind is continually blown as I dive into that side of things. So there's a real difference there. So the idea that if we just knew a little bit more or a lot more, and we just considered all the evidence with equal and fair, just balanced scales, then we would leave the church, is not true at all. And I think probably this poster is going to encounter people that believe that is true, and they're going to instruct him upon X, Y, and Z that happened in the church. And I would just, I guess, if this poster is listening, just to say that it's not that you don't need to know everything. It's that you need to know things to a sufficient degree. Like, for instance, I've heard lots of anti-Mormon arguments. Do I need to hear more? Do I need to get a PhD in all of these anti-Mormon topics? No, I don't think I do, because I've seen this pattern.
What about a life coaching certification? No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in there. All right, go ahead.
If we aspire to big things, maybe we can achieve them, but like life coaching. But anyway, the pattern is that I'm not actually expanding myself by learning more of these things. And so if something comes along that is truly novel from an anti-Mormon, I don't think, oh my goodness, and drop everything, because I know it's probably the same as the other 100 things that are constantly being repeated. It's probably just another one of them. And so I can, as I go along, I can receive confidence in sort of the fruits of it. Does that make sense? I think
yeah. So there's a discrepancy of depth with the gospel and anti-Mormon arguments and ex-Mormon arguments, where and if we were to believe, like, framing this like I'm doing a scientific study, you know, with my poster board. So if the hypothesis here is that the more education you get, the less likely you are to be a faithful member of the church, then we would expect that more educated members of the church would leave, where there are statistics out there that show that the population of the church that stay active in the church are generally more educated than the average population, which completely cuts against that hypothesis out there. So I reject the hypothesis in that case, you know. And I'll get my glue stick and I'll just put that on, boom, right onto the side panel of that cardboard thing. Yeah. Put it up at the science fair.
Absolutely.
Love that point.
Jacob Wardell is calling out Austin Five, who wrote the Light and Truth letter, and he did a great job of showing all these arguments as well. So I recommend, if anyone hasn't heard of the Light and Truth letter, go to lightandtruthletter.com. It's a great document.
That's awesome.
Online.
Yeah, go get it. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, well, let's pivot now into something a little bit lighter. Everyone can breathe. We can relax a little bit. Here we go. This one is from Enough. Hold on. I'm recentering my screen. Enough position 1298. It says, is it possible to ask for a calling? Basically the title. I'm not going on a mission due to personal reasons, but want a chance to serve in some capacity. This is just something that came to my head. So, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, for sure. Like, that's every bishop's dream, is that people would all just line up and say, I'm ready, you know, please put me to work. I think the only caveat to that is, like, if you go up to your bishop and be like, I want to be elders quorum president, or I would like to be in the bishopric, you know, that, like, a specific calling, if you're really narrowing it down to something specific, I want to be second counselor in the elders quorum, then that's going to be, you're probably going to be disappointed. You know, if you're like seeking power, because there's this perception that people in leadership positions have a modicum of power, which is just not at all accurate. Once you actually get in those positions, you feel quite powerless most of the time. Totally. But I think that as long as you're not, like, specifically requesting, like, certain callings at certain times, yeah, I do that almost every time I go to a new ward. You go up and you talk to the bishop and you say, hey, I'm here. We're here now. Put me to work. You know, I'm ready to help.
Totally. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the bishop would be thrilled. And what's often missing in callings, I think, is enthusiasm. Not often, but there are times when enthusiasm is the missing element, right? And if you are enthusiastic about it, that alone qualifies you for the work, I think. And of course, asking for a certain calling X, like nursery leader, for example, I don't know. And then a few years later, if you're released from nursery leader and you're serving in something else, we should still just be as willing to leave nursery and go to something else. It's really kind of a mindset of not like, I want this and I'm getting this, but making known your strength and your skills and your enthusiasm for a certain type of thing. And kind of the opposite of this question is, can I reject a calling? Maybe that's another one. Like, if I'm called to gospel doctrine and I really can't get up in front of people should I say no because I know I'm not going to be good at it? You know, these thoughts may be going through here, or
Yeah.
should I say yes because the Lord has called me and I'm going to do it? That's sort of the reverse of this coin. So that's also a difficult question, and I think it's individual and it's circumstantial, and you
It
can't
totally
actually,
is.
it can
You
go
know,
either way, right?
many are called, but few are chosen. And why are they not chosen? It goes back to their heart and their desires, you know, so it is individual. You know, it's like, where are you at? Where are you at with your testimony? Where are you at with things? It sounds like this brother's in a good place. He's saying like, hey, I may not be able to go on a mission right now, but I do want to serve in some capacity. Tell that to your leader. And they will do a backflip and they will be like, oh, thank heavens, you know, because I think a lot of times leaders assume that people don't want callings. And I think leaders are a little bit, in my experience, for the most part, they're like, let's try not to overburden anybody. And so if you're coming up there and saying like, hey, I'm ready, put me in, coach, let me have a calling. Good revelation is based off of good information. So they will, don't expect them to just sit back and say, all right, you know, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and I'm going to realize that you need a calling. I think go up there, tell them I'm ready for a calling, and they will get you a calling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think bishopric revelation isn't magic. It starts with information. I think that was one of the comments in the Reddit thread. But that's not to say that there isn't revelation that
Totally
is void of information. That can totally exist. I mean, there was that talk, I think it was last conference with Elder Cavalcante, The Wind Will Never Cease to Blow. And he talked about how he wanted to call this guy to bishopric. He wore his sunglasses and he couldn't read, right? Or something. And everyone thought this was a terrible choice for someone to be in bishopric. And, you know, he called that guy up. He stood in the stand and whispered to him about something about sunglasses. He took off his sunglasses. I'm not doing the story any justice. But this man really stepped up. This man who wanted to sit in the back wearing his sunglasses and go to sleep and not participate, he felt he should call this man, and he did. And this man stepped up and helped and blessed the ward, blessed himself. So that can totally exist. And that would, you know, information would go against that. But certainly the bishop, I'm sure the bishopric would love more information about what kinds of things you would be excited to do and would love to incorporate that in some kind of ward plan, which is essentially like putting people together in the way that works best.
Totally. Right? And I think what happened, that conversation with the bishop and the guy with the sunglasses, the bishop leaned over and asked him like, hey, is there a medical reason why you need to wear those sunglasses? And he was like, no. Right. And he said, the members need to see your eyes. Like they need to see you. Right. And I was like, it was a powerful talk. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's great. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. Let's see, this one right here. It's titled, "What is the purpose of garments?" Okay, here we go. It says, doctrinal question.
Before you jump into that, Civil Maniac said, told my bishop in my singles ward years ago I wanted a calling. He pulled out a list and presented a couple options. Chose family history leader and had a blast.
Look at that.
Awesome. Wow. The bishop's like, hey, just pick one from the list. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are some members out there that would do great no matter where they served. So, I mean, that shows that bishop knew that you would be a good fit no matter what. Like, the amount of trust and confidence that bishop has in you is top notch. So, that's a little call out of your character there.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. There's another comment here, too. Do you want to read that one as well, Tanner?
Oh, sure, yeah. I told one of my former bishops what my callings are and was told to tell the bishopric to let someone else have a turn after a few years. That's awesome.
Right on. Okay, so let me dive in. We're getting into garments. Okay, what is the purpose of garments? This is from Commercial Salty 9516. Not affiliated with the channel, different kind of salt.
I was wondering.
Yeah. This is.
Are we answering our own questions?
Yeah. Oops. What a random question to ask. Yeah. Says, hello, LDS community. I hear the garment is an outward expression of an inner commitment to follow Christ and that they are to act as a reminder of a promise made at the temple. I don't quite get that, though. Isn't the way we live our lives and our thoughts and our actions the outward expression of our inner commitment to follow Christ? Why are physical clothes needed to prove that we're already supposed to be doing anyways? Please let me know your thoughts, and if you have any talks or anything that explain this, that would be great too. David, I know you were chomping at the bit with garments, so we'll kick this one off to you. to start us off.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts here. Not all of them are related to this. We should do a separate episode on that. But
Sure.
Regarding this, there was a common theme here in the responses, and I think everyone's right that it's an expression and a reminder of our covenants, right? An expression means like something that I'm expressing, perhaps to God, perhaps to other people, and a reminder is sort of something that's sort of circling back on me, right? So there's this bidirectional thing, which is true. I think there's a third aspect to. I don't know if I want to get into that because I might be getting us off track, but I think it's also a source of learning for us, which doesn't really fall into the bucket of expression or reminder. Like it's a way
no. Let's touch on that. Yeah.
Something. Okay, so there's a lot of ways we could take this. Obviously, the temple instructs us, but I think each of the symbols of the temple instructs us as well. One example of that is, I don't want to get into this, but the garments are, in a way, of course, they represent Christ. They represent a lot of things. They represent being covered by the atonement.
Yeah, kafar.
There's multivalent kind of symbolism. Another one is they actually, I believe, represent our bodies, clothing our spirits. And that comes about because the garments were given to Adam and Eve when they left the Garden of Eden. And it's sort of somewhat well established that the Garden of Eden is at least one of the multivalent symbol levels. The Garden of Eden is a symbol of our pre-earth life, where we lived with God. And when we left the pre-earth life, that's
a different plane of existence. Yeah.
Right. And so what is the garment of skins? Well, maybe it's literally a garment of skins. I'm covered in a garment of skins right now, right? So the garment that we received in the temple was told to us. It doesn't say in the temple that it represents Christ. Well, it does. It doesn't say in the temple that it represents being covered with the atonement. Well, it does represent that, but we're not told that. We're told that it represents the garment that Adam and Eve were given. And that garment, at least in some sense, represents our own bodies. So how do we treat our bodies? How thankful are we that we were able to come here and receive this body and all that comes with it? And what kinds of things do we do with our bodies, like to keep them clean, keep them healthy? How do we treat them? But anyway, so the point is like that this is just one sort of facet, but that's something where I don't think it falls into this idea of an expression or necessarily a reminder. It's like a third bucket. It's like a source of learning. I haven't actually got a word for this.
Yeah.
It's a school.
An instructor.
Instructor. Yeah, exactly. And Civil Maniac says, I'd argue it's a really simple way to submit to the Lord. For some people, wearing garments is the same as the rich man giving up all his possessions. And that's before we get into symbolism. And I agree. I think that also, sorry, one more thought here to tack on to the end, just going off what Civil Maniac said. It's a deeply personal thing where part of the test, of course, most of the test, the obvious part of the test is ourselves and how we interpret the garments and how we follow commandments and so forth. But a less obvious part of the test, but just as important, is how we feel towards other people following. Like if we are the Pharisees and the Sadducees that are like looking down upon other people for not wearing the garments or for taking off the top garment when they're mowing their lawns, like if we're the guys that are,
right, that all the anti-members complain about online, that are like, I just felt judged whenever I showed my shoulders, and now I have trauma because of that. Yeah, go ahead.
And that's part of the test. That's part of the whole idea of garments. It's not just for us. It's to see how we react with other people who are given the same commandments, to see how we treat them when they interpret things differently in a perfectly valid way for them. Because I have no way of saying whether their way is valid or not. All I have to assume is it's valid. And all I can control is my own validity of my own interpretation. And part of the test is seeing how we interact with other people in this messy world with other interpretations, right? So there should be no judgment, zero, and we can focus upon ourselves there as well.
Totally. Judgment is mine, saith the Lord, right? Yeah, that's great. Tanner, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, that's one of the reasons why we wear garments underneath our clothing, so it doesn't become a point of vanity of like, I'm wearing my garments versus you not. And there's, if you watch a lot of ex-Mormon content, you would believe that there's a, garment Gestapo out there. Looking for, are you wearing your garments? That really doesn't That's really just not the case. You might find the occasional judgmental members who have yet to learn the true lesson of garments, like you were saying, David, who haven't yet matured into the fact that it's everyone's choice and you have to make that choice every morning,
Yeah.
But really, it's just up to you, and it's up to the promises that you make. And the real question is, do you want to make those promises in the temple to wear your garments? And if so, will you keep those promises? And you just have to keep making that decision to keep those promises every day, or reflect on whether or not you should make that promise in the first place if you're not ready for it.
Yeah.
And another question this poster asks is basically, aren't our actions sufficient? Like, can't we just go and be good people and do the right thing? Like, can't we pray to God?
Like, isn't that the symbol? Yeah.
Kind to other people. Like, why do we also need to wear something? Right. And I say to that, well, why not both? Actually, I think wearing garments is a subset of actions. I think the poster is saying, why can't we just do the actions? Well, this is one of the actions that we are that helps us to, integrate all the other actions that are following the commandments of God and receiving the benefit therefrom, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I really like that. Okay, yeah. I think my 2 cents on this, I think I mentioned this previously before we hopped on. One of the things that I've discovered over the years is that in the Jewish tradition, they believe that Adam and Eve were clothed in a garment of light. It represented like this holy royal garment. And so that was stripped away after they partook of the fruit. And that's when they realized, like, oh, I'm naked, and that this garment that was made for them was actually a representation of that garment of light called the Shekinah that they could return to and receive again, which kind of plays into the Hymn of the Pearl a little bit. If you like the apocryphal Hymn of the Pearl there, and you're familiar with that, it's all about this young royal prince who loses his royal robes, comes down to a test, and then is able to receive those after he passes the test. So to me, I like to view it also as kind of like a reminder of that royal aspect as well. But I think the thing I love about symbols is that they can continually teach us, and that they can continually, there's depth, like what David said in the last question. There is so much depth with symbols where you don't have that outside of symbols. There are a lot of Anne Franks, of anti-members who were hiding from those Gestapos in their minds, who were like, oh no, I was oppressed. It's like, you might have had 1 or 2 crazy members out there that were like, what's going on with the garments? Yeah, or maybe a crazy local leader or something like that. But understand, that's a crazy person. It's like, don't just sever your tie to your spiritual oxygen tank because of a crazy person, or someone who doesn't understand the doctrine. That would be my advice.
And I think that's a third part of the test, right? Well, maybe a first part of a test would be our own interpretation and how we express that, whether we wear them or not, and how we wear them and when we wear them. The second part of the test, or maybe not test, but the second part of the practice, I would say, is how we treat others with their own interpretation, and do we grant that as valid or not. And the third way is what you just said, Hayden, of how
we respond.
How we respond. Yeah, exactly. When other people judge it, or are we like caught up in our own heads and the anxiety of, I think everyone's looking at me, they're looking for my garment lines, or do we just let that go? Because guess what? Maybe that's part of the whole practice of it, is learning to let that anxiety go and to be comfortable in your own testimony of where you're at with your interpretation of what it actually means to follow this commandment. And if you sincerely believe it means X, and you're not just doing this, you're not just saying X because I want it to be X, I want to be able to like take off my garment top and mow the lawns, but you actually believe that is right, and you've gone to the Lord and prayed, and then that's, being able to conquer our own anxieties is also part of this whole practice as well, right?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And I mean, going back to that original study, there's your reduced anxiety, your reduced depression. It's because you're faced with it. I mean, you have to make these choices constantly. There's a book that Jordan Peterson just recently came out with called We Who Wrestle with God. And it basically just talks about like the main idea behind it all is like having a religion or a belief system gives you a lens through which you have to judge every single action and decision that you make. And that's what his interpretation is of wrestling with God, is because every decision becomes a wrestle where you have to decide kind of conscientiously, how am I going to handle this? You know, am I going to view it through this lens of what the church has given me and respond like Jesus would, or am I going to just toss that lens aside, you know, and not wrestle with it anymore? But yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you guys think about?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. An interesting topic, which might be for another day, but is kind of this tension in the church of, I don't know how to phrase this, but do we believe in magic? Question mark. And the idea that I'm trying to get across is magic is not the right word, but
Right.
do we believe that when you walk in a room, everyone's eating, and someone's like, the food is blessed, that you're like, okay, and dig in.
Yeah.
Like, did blessing the food actually make a physical change on the food such that you can now eat it and it will?
You're getting to a cultural call out.
bones?
This is something that's been under my skin for a long time. Yeah.
But relating to the garments, do we believe there are other things too? Like, do we how physical is the anointing, and another thing is the garments. How much do we believe that it truly physically protects us from that falling brick that's going to hit us or whatever? I think there's actually, it's not a simple answer. I think it's not simply not a protection. The garment is it's not magic on one end of the scale, and on the other end of the scale, it's not simply just a symbol and a reminder of some nice feelings and thoughts in our minds and some covenants. Right?
Right.
It also is fully a protection, but it's not on either end of the scale. So,
Right.
and it's similar with the food. It's similar with the anointing. It's similar with all these physical things. And I think we have a really interesting theology that doesn't completely separate the physical and the spiritual. They're always tied. It's always like one tugging on the other. And so, but this is a whole thing. We should do an episode on this sometime. And on
no, I think that's
magic.
I think that's great. No, I think priesthood power is a great word. Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. There are stories, I mean, that I've heard from like mission companions where they had like I had one mission companion from Ecuador who mentioned that I think it was his dad was walking home one night to their apartment, and a thief came out and just basically just started shanking him as much as he could, you know, and his father thought that he was going to bleed out. He thought he was going to die. This guy, he gave him his wallet. He had been hit a couple times. He gets under a street light and he just checks himself, and he just has holes in his shirt, and underneath he just sees his garments and there's no hole in his garment. And so he had like that mithril magic moment, you know, where he was like, whoa, you know, look at that, you know, and that made a really big impact on my mission companion, you know, and I'm like, you know, there is something to that element as well, you know, where there are stories like that out there, that the way that I viewed it and the way that I've come to grapple with that in my mind is there are a handful of scriptures in the Book of Mormon that mention that God works with men according to their faith in him. And I believe that, like, if you have simple, untroubled faith, that, you know, wearing the garment and you actually have faith in it, you know, and you aren't going out there specifically, you know, trying intentionally to get stabbed and to prove anything scientifically or anything like that. But if you do have faith in your covenants and faith in that relationship with God, and you have faith that God will take care of you as you invest time and sacrifice into that relationship, then there are going to be divine blessings that come from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, just to be clear, I do believe that there is physical protection, and I do believe that I have been saved multiple times, but I've never been stabbed and never been shot, and I've never like had a fire that stopped perfectly at my kneecaps, right?
Yeah.
That where I was going to get burnt up otherwise. But so this is also part of the practice as well. Is what is our level of faith in that, and God will bless us according to our faith, right?
Right.
So having faith in the protection leads to the protection. If that makes sense, and that's the connection, I think.
Totally. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, Tanner, we did get a question from our Discord server, and I do want to make sure that we call that out and that we bring that up. Do you have that question in front of you?
Yeah, let me pull it up real quick here. All right. Here we go. Okay. If I can find it. Oh, here we go. Okay. So the question is from Colby. And he said, how do you make a scripture study plan and stay excited about it? I can do the Come Follow Me study manual, but it rarely takes me more than a couple of days to feel satisfied with the week's lesson. But then I can struggle with deciding what else to read or study. I do best when I have something I know I'm preparing for, like a talk, an upcoming conversation about a gospel topic, or trying to figure out a way to help someone I know is struggling with something. So the real question is, how do you keep engaged in your scripture study?
Outside of Come Follow Me. Is that right?
Outside of Come Follow Me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So when I read that, some of the things that came to my mind are the challenges that have been issued throughout conference. So one of the challenges that I've been working on for probably like the past couple of years was from President Nelson, who said he encouraged and invited, I think it was all the young members, to study all of the references of Jesus Christ from the topical guide and to see what they could learn. Like, what do these teach about him? What do the different titles mean? What is the context behind those titles and things like that? I don't know that I'll ever be able to do that in a year, but when I am, like if I do get through like Come Follow Me and I'm early that week, I pick up a challenge from a prophet and I'm like, okay, let me go back to my study on the Savior's different titles and see where I'm at. Obviously, I haven't gotten too far on that one. I think I'm at Deliverer and Redeemer right now. So in that list, it's pretty close to the top of that list. The other piece I would say is like, if you are facing struggles right now and you're facing hard times, or if there are challenges that you're facing, I would say pick one of those, like pick a gospel principle that relates to that challenge and then study that through the lens of like the topical guide, because the topical guide is there to be a study help. I think it's pretty underutilized, and I would say it serves as a great teacher and tutor to help you understand the different gospel principles throughout the context of the different verses that it lists. So, for example, I have been studying hope for like the past quarter, and I'm like, I feel like I could use more hope in my life and more faith in my life. And so I'm like, okay, because I read a verse that said, it was from Doctrine and Covenants, it was from Come Follow Me, that said, lift up your heart and rejoice. And instead, I usually read that as like a pat on the head, kind of like Charles DeMar in the movie Better Off Dead, when he talks to Lane Meyer, like, oh, buck up, little camper, we'll get through this, like that's how I usually read that line of like, lift up your heart, rejoice, is like, dig in there, dig deep, sport, you could do it, woo! But this time I actually shifted my tone on that, and I read it more as an injunction, where almost like a command to lift up your heart. So almost like God is saying, you have a responsibility to pick your heart up when you're not feeling great or you're not in a good place. And so I looked into that and I was like, whoa. So that means that we should intentionally be focusing on hope. And that led me down a rabbit hole of studying hope from the topical guide and seeing like, well, how do we build and increase our hope? And how do we better lift up our hearts, especially after seeing like the statistics of like the Elders Quorum and the men in Utah and stuff like that? I'm like, obviously there is a need for people to lift up their hearts, and to be careful about how they treat their hearts and to be conscientious of that. Anyway, that was a little bit of a long rant there. David, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just kind of springboarding off that, you kind of alluded to this idea of what sparks you, what really gets you excited to lift up your hearts. And there have been certain times in my life when certain topics have sparked me. Other times it's more difficult to, actually dig into the scriptures. But for example, a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, this is just one example. I have no connection to these guys, but Dave Butler and Mike Day were on Stick of Joseph, and they were talking all about the temple found in the scriptures and weird places you wouldn't expect to see it, like the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah,
the whole thing's a temple text. Like Lehi's dream, the whole thing is a temple text.
Yeah,
it's like
I've heard that too. Yeah,
and now I read it totally differently. So,
or the Psalms. The Psalms are temple text too.
Psalms, yeah, really. Using that as a starting point, that kind of launched me into this whole like months-long study of where else is this and where are all these connections, and I just loved it. So, whereas if I didn't watched that episode or those episodes, I wouldn't have been sparked. So really go looking for what sparks you, I think. And that may not be, you may not be sparked from the scriptures themselves. You may be sparked from somebody else's commentary. And regarding that, it doesn't have to be necessarily someone from our church. I think, personally, I love biblical commentaries. There are so many Christians in the world and so many smart ones that have written commentaries on the scriptures. And if you're reading in the New Testament or Old Testament, whatever, go like Google for Job chapter 38 commentary or something and just read it. And our theology agrees with theirs, like at least the things they're going to be commenting on, like 95%. So you're not going to you might come across the Trinity or something from time to time, but for the most part, it's all beautiful and solid and well thought out and deep, and it will spark you. It will spark other thoughts and like put you on these paths that you're just like, wow, that's really cool. And I'm going to learn more about that. So another thing is, honestly, this is a serious suggestion.
I'm sensing some emotions bubbling up here. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, a serious suggestion to whoever wrote this question on your Discord: start a YouTube channel. Why I'm saying that is, it doesn't matter if you get thousands of or tens of thousands of people. It doesn't matter even if only 100 people ever watch any one of your videos. It really makes you dig deep into, and just to be able to
makes you figure things out.
Yeah, that's interesting enough to you to read about it. It will be interesting enough to somebody else. It makes you like put all the pieces together in your mind, write out a script, or even don't write a script and just start talking. It's fine. But it's akin to like having a calling in gospel doctrine, which if you've ever had, you probably have had, you've got to prepare and you learn way more than the students. But having a YouTube channel, you're going to be learning way more than the people that are watching it. And it doesn't matter if nobody watches it. Maybe your mom and your dad watch it and that's it. But you'll actually gain deeper scriptural insights than you would if you're just kind of opening the scriptures and just reading along, right? If you're actually preparing something with it, you don't have to be called to gospel doctrine. You can actually just do it right now. You already got a YouTube account. Just click on the upload and start recording.
Yeah,
doesn't have to be good at first, right?
Yeah, it's a good point.
We can test for that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're right there with you. Yeah. Tanner, any thoughts?
There's a couple things that go along really well with what David was just saying. It's like you learn best when you prepare to teach others. And so I have this book. When I got off my mission, my study methodology was just to prepare a talk every week. So I just have a book of talks, you know, and that way it's like, great, you know, now I don't actually have to go and prepare a talk when it's my turn to go give a talk in Sacramento. I have a whole book of talks ready to go.
You've got a library.
Yeah, you just keep adding on to it every time, you know, like I just need a new subject. This is what I'm going to prepare a talk on. And you just go through the entire motions of preparing a talk. You learn a lot that way, you know, and you actually learn a lot about yourself in the process of writing, right? Writing is a great tool for self-development, but that can be a little labor intensive, you know, and some people are not even at the point, you know, some people hit that point like we all do, where it's like, where are my scriptures? You know, like, I don't even know where they are right now. Like that happens sometimes. And sometimes you just got to start basic, like just touch the scriptures, open it up, read a couple verses, and then build on that. Right. So it depends on where you are on the scale of things. Now, if you're reading through Come Follow Me each week and you're looking for more, then like David said, start a YouTube channel, you know, prepare a talk and just like get out there and share it with somebody, because that would like that you step into the arena to defend your faith, essentially. And that summons up a lot of effort and courage to actually believe what you believe. So it can do really good things for you and your testimony and your knowledge of the gospel, because you'll soon realize you better come prepared, right? So I think that's a great idea.
Awesome.
Yeah, Tanner, I'm just picturing you like thinking a few years ago, haha, I'm going to be preparing this library of talks. I'll never have to think about, you know, when I'm giving a talk, I'll just pick one out. And then ChatGPT comes along. And you don't have to do all that, because all you have to do is just put the prompt in and you'll get your library of talks.
There's your talk. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, it was probably ChatGPT learning off of my Google Docs, you know?
There you go. There you go. It just got right in there. Yeah.
Darn it. Yeah, that's funny.
Okay. All right. Well, we did have more, but I think we're getting close to the hour here. So I think this is a good place to wrap up, unless you guys are really wanting to push.
Sounds good to me.
I just want to say hi to Willy Wonka, who joined the chat. And
wow. The Willy Wonka. That's great.
Not the Johnny Depp Willy Wonka. This is what's his name? Gene? Gene Wilder?
Gene Wilder, yeah.
OG Willy Wonka right there.
The best Willy Wonka out
The
there.
best.
Yeah, in my opinion. Really creepy going through that tunnel. Yeah, still, that one gave me nightmares a little bit, but stellar performance.
Still recovering from that one, but really good. Respect it.
Awesome. Okay, well, this has been great. My name is Hayden Holm. This is Tanner. This is David Hutchinson from Sword of Laban. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel. And until next time, we are